This is the art of Startup War. And my name is Brian Mac Mahon, your host and sensei. Here is what we know. 98% of startups will fail every single day, and mostly due to reasons outside your control. The Expert Dojo Startup Accelerator, we look to even up the playing field by sitting down with the greatest minds in startup investment right here in our studio in Silicon Beach, where we look to shine a light on your path to success. Now, our guests each week have invested millions of dollars into startups and are the most respected investors in the world. Now, they share all they know with you, the listener. So join us on Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, starting off your week winning the war against startup failure. Welcome back. Another week, another incredible investor here. And this time I go back to one of my oldest friends here in Santa Monica. When I first came, Mr. Len Lanzie, who is right here in front of me, was the biggest supporter I had in the area. Just not just that he drinks beer, that's a plus, right? He's just a good man. He tries to pretend he's not a good man. He tries to pretend he's all tough and hard and everything, but he's not really. He's a big old soft.
It's beer and Irish whiskey, though, Brian.
Well, it's a bit of the Italian, but welcome, my friend. It's kind of weird. Like, I know I have these things I ask, but obviously we're just going to chat about stuff because we're buddies, and we're going to be at a board meeting in about an hour and a half talking about investment stuff, right?
That's absolutely true. And it's a pleasure to be here, and Happy New Year to you and to all.
Welcome to the fridge.
It's good.
You knew it would be top quality, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to do an introduction. So, Mr. Len Lanzie, LAVA is the Los Angeles Venture Association. This association is must be one of the oldest established, I don't want to say in the US, because I'm sure there's kind of some venture associations which are old, but how far does this go back? Like 30 years?
1984 it was started.
1984, 2018.
It was called the Los Angeles Venture Group back then. And it was really a group of, connectors and service providers who were trying to provide deal flow to their clients. And so they were screening deals and then presenting those deals.
So these attorneys and accountants,
wealth managers would get together monthly, and they would listen to pitches from people that were looking for investors. And it wasn't to particular funds, because funds didn't exist back then. It was really to high net worth individuals.
Existed? Was it just family offices and just wealthy people?
It was wealthy people. The folklore of the organization is these consultants or connectors were working for Robert Redford at the time when he was looking to put money into different companies, and every time he wanted to, like I do today, I say no. You don't want to put money into that company. So finally, Mr. Redford said, well, why don't you come up with a list of companies I should put money into? And they started the venture group at that time to provide that deal flow.
Phenomenal. How many members today?
About 700.
Okay. And how much does someone pay if they want to join?
An entrepreneur and a startup's $199 for the year.
For the whole year, like $15 a month. And I'm saying this, and I'm saying it loud here in the podcast. You never hear me recommend that people should go out there and spend money or do specific things unless I truly believe in it. I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're not a member of LAVA, you're crazy. Like, why the hell would you not be spending $10 or $15 a month to be a member of an organization which has 1,000 or so members, which has got access to some of the best venture flow in the? I mean, it's just stupid. It never ceases to amaze me. I mean, if it was $500 a month, I'd be like, okay, cool, I get it. But for $15 a month, right here in the middle of it, and I've been to, so recently I got really engaged in it, right? But even back in the day, I remember going to some of your original events, the ones down in the Jonathan. It was down in the Jonathan Club. Was it? No, it wasn't Jonathan. It was
at the Shutters in the Fairmont.
What was the big one where you've got the Meet the VCs? Where you
it's Annenberg.
The Annenberg House, right? Where there were 50, 60 VCs in there. You have the VCs around the table pitching to the startups.
Absolutely.
And then all of the VCs go next door into an amazing bar, and everybody gets to know each other. And you do something which I think is really important in this space, which is you demystify the funding thing, because it's scary, right? You're an early stage startup, you're speaking to large VCs, these guys have got a bunch of money, you got no money, and it's scary. And what I liked about that and a lot of the other things you do is you create relationships between the two parties.
And that's our mission. Our mission is to provide opportunities for people to build their capital network, because it's not today that you need to raise money. It's in the future, and you have to build relationships with people before you ask them for money. So if I didn't know you, Brian, and I knew that you had some deep pockets and were making investments, it'd be really hard for me to approach you and say, Brian, you should invest in me.
Yeah.
Number one, you don't know me.
Yeah.
You don't know what I've done in the past. There's no relationship. But if we can build a relationship, and then in a year or so or 18 months after I've kept in touch with you and we've seen each other at events or whatever, then that ask becomes a lot easier for you as an investor to hear.
Because you have enough information as an investor to make a decision, right? Or at least you've more.
Absolutely. And, investors don't invest in ideas and innovation. They invest in people.
Right.
And I come from the fundraising world, and there's an axiom in the fundraising world: people give to people, not to causes.
Yeah.
And it's all about relationships. So the point of Lava is you can come to our events and build relationships not only with the funders, but with other connectors. Because at the end of the day, the amount of deal flow that our local VCs have, and the VCs in Silicon Valley and the angel groups is tremendous. They're looking at 1,000, 1,200 deals a year, and they need to get that deal flow from trusted sources. So it's building a network of people that understand who you are, that are willing to refer you, that feel good about it, and will make that warm introduction for you. So when you want to go raise money from March Capital, it's not you knocking on the door, but it's someone saying, hey, this person has a great idea. They know what they're doing. They have a great resume. They've have some execution experience, and you really should take a look at this deal. And that's how it works.
I remember hearing from one of the local VCs here. I had pitched him forever on this one client. I thought it was a perfect client, a perfect business, a great entrepreneur. It was a really good fit for the investor himself. And then literally 2 months later, the investor calls me up and says, hey, I want to see that deal. I'm going, mate, there's no difference between the deal today and 3 months ago. And he said, yes, there is. I've now heard about this deal from 3 people.
Yep.
That's his criteria. That it's
and
impossible.
they all have different criteria. Yeah. And
but to that connection network that you mentioned, it's so important, because a lot of us believe as entrepreneurs, if we just keep knocking on doors and knocking on doors and knocking on doors, then it will happen. But it's not. It's building that village of people around us who also believe in us for the right reasons, because we've demonstrated that the model is good, who are then telling their trusted friends that this is an investable deal.
It's good storytelling too. You need to be able to tell your story in a way that engages people, that wants them to be interested in who you are and what you're doing. What problem are you solving? How you are solving that problem? How big is the market? Who is already in that space and what the competitors look like? You have to know everything about what you're doing when you tell your story, so you have some sincerity, some believability, and ultimately some trust.
Yeah. What are some of the highlights of Lava? I mean, normally I go into a bunch of other questions, but we've got a 30-year-old organization here, one of the deepest venture organizations in Southern California. You must have seen a bunch of stuff coming through your door. You must have seen some amazing entrepreneurs and some terrible. We'll get to the terrible ones after, but just tell me some of the high points.
Well, before I get into individual companies, because that's actually a difficult question because there's so many. I think some of the highlights for the organization itself was realizing if we were going to truly serve entrepreneurs, we couldn't do a 7 a.m. breakfast once a month with great speakers and hope that we had entrepreneurs show up and hope that we had capital providers show up. So when we decided to get away from that once a month breakfast and move to Silicon Beach and do our events in the evening using Expert Dojo, using some of the local hotels and some of the other spaces like General Assembly and the Arizona State California Center and some of the other spaces around town.
You do loads of events now.
Yeah, we do about 40 a year.
Yeah.
All of a sudden we became a lot more relevant to the entrepreneurial community because they were interested in coming. They wanted to have a beer when they met people. It became much more casual. It wasn't a bunch of, and I say this with all the dearness in my heart, it wasn't a bunch of old white men in suits sitting at breakfast tables listening to speakers, because that's what, had happened in the, early, late 90s, early 2000s. I came to Lava in 2007. And
it was Texas time, was it?
Yeah. So it's a different world today, and we really focus on first-time entrepreneurs, people who don't have a capital network, people who are maybe working.
Which is beautiful, by the way. I just want to stick on that because technically, if you look at Los Angeles Venture Association, if you wanted to take the easy road, you would go for people who are all at Series B or Series C, work with the glamour companies, schmooze them. But it's not. I always see you and the real early stage folks, the guys who are doing their first pitch decks, their first business plans, getting the first introductions, where in many cases, they're not even ready for them quite yet, but you're preparing them.
Well, and that's because there's no other organization out there serving those people.
Yeah.
They get left behind because there are serial entrepreneurs, there are people with track records who don't need a Lava to go raise money. They already have those relationships. And it's interesting you mentioned Series B and Series C. There really isn't that much Series B and C money here in Los Angeles to begin with. So our relationships would then have to go to Silicon Valley or to New York to find those bigger firms. This is a market of 1 and 2 people, companies that are trying to solve problems, that have big ideas,
cage
that want to scale.
Fighting, not much money, bobootstrapping their way
through. Their way, and our goal then is to help those people navigate and understand. It's a very competitive marketplace. No one deserves to get funded. You have to earn that right with trust and building relationships. And that's what Lava helps people do. And one of my favorite success stories, I have 2 favorite success stories. One is we had a conference that we used to do that was an investment capital conference. It became very middle market focused. But I remember hiring this photographer to take pictures at it. And he was a go-getter. And he had an idea for a company. And while he's taking pictures, he met one of the VCs and got to talking with him and told him about his idea, and they kept in contact. And about 3 months later, he got a term sheet.
Whoa!
And and then 6 years later, the guy sold his company and made a bunch of money.
Beautiful.
And that's somewhat happenstance, but that's kind of how these things happen.
Yeah.
Another great story is a company that was spun out of technology out of UCLA. It's called Neural Analytics. Very bright investigator and innovator working on concussion detection and prevention. And, we met at our First Look LA program where we let demo day innovation coming out of research institutions in Los Angeles. And he presented, and after that presentation, there were investors in the room, and they were asking questions, and he built some relationships, eventually led to funding. And then he came back, I think 2 years later, to meet the VC. And he met more investors, and that's when he was able to get, I believe, his Series A funding. And then 2 years later, we were recognizing him at our awards dinner for having the best life science funding for that particular year.
Yeah.
And, he's gone on, and I think he raised another $15 million this year already. And he's building a company that is substantial, that has great clients like the NHL. And, that's a Lava success story on so many levels because it followed a life cycle. And there's many, many more.
So how do those people differ from some of the ones that you see that are struggling to get the funding, like the photographer? Is it just as simple as the go-getting and catching the opportunity? I know Bill Gross did that great talk about timing
Timing's everything,
with it?
And being in the right place at the right time. So you have to put yourself out there. You can't sit at home and twiddle your thumbs and hope people call you.
Yeah.
You have to go out and meet people, and you never know who you're going to meet. So you always have to have business cards. You always have to be ready with your elevator pitch. You always have to be able to tell your story. And you always have to follow up. Because
which very few people do.
You need to follow up with folks and send them a nice little note.
What does that follow-up look like? So if I meet a VC, if I go to one of the Lava events, I meet a VC there, we have a quick 5-minute chat. I don't want to harass him. Is he going to even read my follow-up email?
Yeah, well, I would send it. Whether he reads it or not, you don't have any control over. But you have to go through the practice and the exercise of doing those things. Even if they don't, you have to do it because you never know if they are. Because it might be that one thing that, hey, I remember Brian McMahon telling me about this company, and this guy's following up with me. And
it's
I
the
met
name
him.
recognition.
It's the name
lot.
recognition.
Yeah.
So it's, in fundraising, we talk about 7 touches a year with a donor to keep them engaged, to keep that gift going.
Let's speak to that a little bit. So 7 touches a year with a donor. So a donor is a potential investor or is an investor. It could be either.
Either. I in the fundraising world for charitable nonprofits, donors are people that invest their money in a cause. And whoever's asking that person for money needs to keep them warm and fuzzy.
Okay, so let's say it's our hot list of investors or people who have invested. I'm gonna say we need 15 investors into our companies. We're raising like $1 million. We've already got 7 or 8 of them. Those 7 or 8, we've just agreed between us. We're going to touch them at least 7 times so we can give them continual updates. But we're also taking our hot list of other investors and keeping them in a tickle funnel to do exactly the same thing.
Absolutely. In fun,
I like that.
in my world, it's called
showing
moves.
them milestones.
It's called moves management. But there's all sorts of Gantt charts and ways to track, your relationships with people, whether you use Salesforce management tools or whatever. I use LinkedIn as my management tool for my database. I have a closed LinkedIn database. I only have people in my database I know that I've had conversations with. I very rarely will respond to somebody I don't know. Actually, I send most people an email saying, I don't know who you are. This is a closed database. If you're willing to spend 15, 20 minutes with me to meet for coffee or over the phone, then we can talk about, your access.
No spamming area and keep it extremely relevant.
And, I get a 10% return on that.
Yeah.
90% of the people don't bother to respond.
What's the point?
So, I think people are just generally lazy and shotgun shooting. And when you're out raising money, it is a numbers game, but you have to rifle shoot. You have to make sure you know your target. You have to make sure the target's the right target for you. And that's going to increase your success. And the other thing is you want to have investors as individuals that you get along with, that believe in you, believe in your mission, believe in your product, believe in your company, that are there to add help and be supportive and be additive to what you're doing. You can get some cantankerous investors, and they may be able to write you a check, but if you don't feel good about that, or you don't feel that they're going to be somebody you can be honest with, or you have to hold your cards too close to the vest with, that's going to be a very contentious relationship for a company that, a lifespan of a startup from startup to exit in LA is averaging 8 to 10 years.
That's tough. That's longer than most marriages.
It's longer
you can go
than
through
most.
a couple of divorces in that stage.
And it's really hard to divorce somebody who has $1 million into your company.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. They divorce you.
They do.
And a lot of CEOs and founders of startups find themselves on the wrong end of the deal because the board votes them out.
It's very true. And I would say when I first came down here, I was a little bit naive on maybe the relationship between startup and investors. And I think I was right in that there's a toxic relation and there's a relationship and possibly there's too many people from some area getting investment and not enough people from other areas getting investment. But leaving aside that idealistic stance, I did look at the amount of entrepreneurs that got fired from their business after Series A and B. And at the beginning, I thought, man, this is really unfair. It's terrible on entrepreneurs. But then I looked at some of the communication between the entrepreneurs and their investors, and there would be 2 sides to every story in a lot of these cases. These investors want to keep their entrepreneurs on board as long as they're protecting the investment that they're making. But if they're not even telling them what's happening in the business, then what the hell do they think is going to happen?
Transparency with your investors is paramount.
Yeah, and I like, so 7 touches, so entrepreneurs, everybody who's listening, 7 touches minimum every year with your investors, but with your hot prospects, keep your emails relevant to them, respond back to any questions that you have, show them the milestones that you're aiming for over the year, and let them know how you're doing against the milestones. And if you miss your milestones, that's okay too. They don't mind. They just want to know what's happening.
And I'll just modify your statement a little bit. 7 touches to your potential investors. Once they've made an investment, you're going to be talking to them a lot more than 7 times.
Yeah.
You're going to be talking to those folks on a monthly basis at board meetings, keeping your investors updated, making sure they know when milestones are being met. because when you're ready to go to that second round, your biggest cheerleading team are going to be the people who currently have money in.
Right. What about horrible investment stories over the last couple of years? And there has to be a good story from it, right? I don't want to, I definitely don't ever want to bash people here, but I imagine over the years you've seen some pretty horrific crashes.
Failure happens, and it's okay. One of the things that's different between Americans in our startup and innovation community and Europeans.
Well, the Irish people, we steal all of our startups from America. Like
all right,
we
so
actually we don't bother.
I'll talk about Italy because I know that community fairly well. We are, as Americans, rewarded for failure. Failing is okay because you're supposed to take lessons away from that. In Europe or in Italy in particular, you can't fail because once you fail, you're done.
Yeah.
And there's so few investors that if they feel that you weren't able to execute and you lost money for somebody, you'll never get another investment. So they're punished for failure.
And you believe the success rates are higher over there because of that?
No, the success rates aren't higher, and that's why we have a much more vibrant ecosystem here.
But I mean the average success rates for entrepreneurs who start versus entrepreneurs who make it, as opposed to like big unicorns.
I mean, when I've gone to Europe and look at their investor and their entrepreneurs, they tend to be older. They tend to have more degrees than our folks. We have
probably more established
people, people who've had jobs or careers, and then are then going back and becoming innovators.
Yeah,
we're short circuiting that here. We have a lot of innovators and people with ideas who really haven't had their first 9-to-5 job ever.
Right,
and that presents some difficulties because it's really hard to prove a track record when you don't have one.
Yeah,
and so if you're a 26-year-old person who's now come out of Anderson or coming out of the Marshall School at USC, and you haven't had any work experience, you may have a great idea and product and the best solution in the world, but it's really hard for someone to take a bet on you because you have to prove to them that you can execute.
And how do you do that?
Without having a job, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
That's why people are very frustrated in this marketplace because they're first-time entrepreneurs and really haven't built a track record for themselves.
Yeah. And we've seen seed investment dropping. I think, I don't want to say all of America, but certainly in Southern California, right? Even though general investment has stayed high, but
I think the type of seed investment has changed. So we have. It ebbs and flows. I mean, there's a lot of new funds in Los Angeles that are, $50 million funds portraying themselves as seed investment funds. They are doing seed funding. We have angel groups that do seed funding. But even the angel groups today want, traction.
They're looking for later stage.
They're looking for an MVP already. They're not looking to fund ideation.
Yeah.
So who's funding ideation? And that's a challenge. Because in the before the .com bust in 2001, there was a lot of ideation funding.
Right.
There was a lot of money going around, but people are much more particular today in how they're funding and what they're funding and at what stage they're funding.
So what should people do?
Bootstrap. Make sure you do a friends and family round.
That's a great point. Just sticking on that for a second. Focus on revenue and building something small. I'm a huge fan of being, look, this is my story for my whole life, is like be the wizard behind the curtain for a little while. It's okay. Like it's lovely to have bells and whistles and shiny stuff and platforms and databases. I mean, that's lovely. But at the beginning, you can manufacture most of those with plastic and paper, right? Just by, as long as the general service behind it's okay. And if you have to be that wizard for a while, obviously you can't scale it, but you can certainly market validate it.
That's right. You have to market validate it, and you have to build it. And luckily in the e-commerce marketing space, there's not a lot of capital outlay. When you start building things, the capital outlay becomes a little bit more if you have to manufacture something. that becomes
That's
a challenge.
where it's tough, right? If you're in medical devices, if you're in drugs, if you're in those types of areas.
Another success story in the ecosystem is a company that came out of the Precelerator over at Stubbs Alderton Marklees.
Yeah.
And Duncan and Corey with Rally. And, they had their idea of what they wanted to do. They got accepted to Techstars in London and went and spent 3 months in London and really refined what they were their product and how they were going to do it. And
fascinating going a company from here going to an American accelerator, Techstars, over in London where there's fewer investors.
But there they were able to get some clarity on what they were trying to do. And they came back here and they're killing it. And they're delivering product. You can go to the King's Head right now and they have a charger that's for your cell phone, and you plug it in and it downloads the software onto your phone that delivers advertisements and such. But it's brilliant. It's free. Gives you a
came
charge.
Out of Stubbs. Scott Alderton, by the way, shout out for Scott, is another one of the greatest guys I've met here in Silicon Beach. He's got a good heart.
Yep, absolutely. So that's another success story that just comes to mind of two guys that bootstrapped, that worked hard. They were able to get some money together to put together their MVP. And I remember watching them sitting, together in a team of people building these things. And getting them ready to put into the marketplace.
Yeah. And by the way, on this subject that we're talking about here, which are really who are your supporters in the local area, I don't mind where you are in the world. It's all the same as it is here in Los Angeles. I mean, if we look at the local ecosystem, there's about 5 or 10 people who are just monster supporters of the early stage space. Len, obviously, with Lava. If you're not constantly interacting, there's something wrong with you. People like you mentioned the Stubbs Alderton pre-accelerator. I mean, they take companies in which are extremely early, cover legal fees, space, a number of other things. You pay them if you get funding in the future. Nice deal for the companies who are coming in. I remember Howard Marks. I've had Howard on here before. Howard came out years ago. I remember when the first Start Engine came out and he was funding people. Like, there's probably 10 or 15 people and spaces that really support you. Make sure that you are around these spaces, and you may not have a 25-minute interactive conversation with these people in the first go, but if you're around enough time, you get to know them, right?
That's right.
I'm sure when you first saw me, you didn't think that I was the debonair, awesome, funny, charismatic Irish guy that I am today.
I plead the fifth. I don't want to answer that question on the grounds it may incriminate myself.
Who's that friggin' jackass? So look, you're an entrepreneur. You're in LA. You've got a great idea. It's got a good market. What are you going to do? Starting from the beginning, and you do need some money. You've built a minimum viable product. You got something where you've proven it, and you've got it out. Where are you starting? And how are you doing?
I'm networking in the spaces that make sense with people who can connect me to capital that meets the type of industry that I'm in.
Yeah. So first, you're saying you're going to research that industry,
research the industry,
who's going to be the investors,
know who's investing in the space already, know who the competitors are, know who the strategics are, have an idea. Maybe
where would you get that information? Maybe
Crunchbase, Ben Close, SoCalTech.com, probably the two primary research engines I use.
What is SoCal? I know Ben, but I haven't been on SoCal Tech that much. Will it show all of the companies that have got
funded? Yeah, he has a search engine similar to Crunchbase, but it's all Southern California based.
Yeah.
So it's all our local ecosystem that he keeps track of. And he has, at 6 a.m., the first thing I read every morning is his email that talks about the deal flow that happened yesterday.
Right. So you're not even talking just about research. You're talking about getting Google alerts or getting subscriptions to all of the because this is a full-time job. Right?
CB Insights is another newsletter that's daily that I get that talks about the ecosystem. There's a couple that I keep tabs on. Lava participates with a company called Aggregate that does a SoCal Tech newsletter.
Yeah.
And they aggregate stories from the tech space and put them out to, a huge mailing list here in Southern California.
Okay, brilliant. So you've got all this information coming. Do you use AngelList as well at all?
I don't.
Any use to an entrepreneur?
I think it could be. I think we have a sophisticated angel, ecosystem in Los Angeles with several angel groups, and they're reputable. They make investments. If you look at Pasadena Angels, they're making investments of about $5 million a year.
Yeah.
Tech Coast Angels here in Los Angeles. And know that Tech Coast Angels has an LA chapter. It has a Santa Barbara chapter. It has an Orange County chapter, a San Diego chapter, an Inland Empire chapter. And these are folks that are pooling their money together or as individuals making investments in the ecosystem. Typically, they have an online process, but there's always ways to find out, who the key players are and to find out where they're going and meet them. Use LinkedIn.
So you're finding out right at the start. You're looking at all of the angel groups. Who are the angels within that group? Where are they? A lot of them are speaking in a bunch of places, right? So where are they going to be? And then you go to that place so they can get to know you.
That's correct.
Okay.
You have to go where they are. They're not going to come to you.
Okay, very good. And then let's say you do the first month, you hit all the angel groups, you're looking at maybe some of the early stage venture seeds that you think might be relevant, and they all say no.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an average
Well,
day,
because you probably
right?
haven't, you probably shouldn't have asked.
Right.
Right? You're asking the wrong question. You want to meet these people and say, hey, this is my idea. Can I pick your brain and get some advice on it? Let them buy into what you're doing. Let them get to know you.
As opposed to saying, have you got any money?
That's correct.
Yeah.
When I was doing...
Because actually the advice is very valuable, right? These guys are seeing deals every single day.
When I raise money for nonprofits, when I'm out there pitching, high net worth individuals on a particular organization that I might be working for or volunteering for, I'm telling a story and getting their feedback. And I'm creating an opportunity for them to engage.
Yeah.
And the best question they can ask is, how can I help?
Lovely.
Once they invite you with that question, then you can ask.
Yeah.
And then do your research. Know what to ask for. Know the size funding that they make, the size donation that they make. Know what industry they fund. Know what type of engagement. All that information is out there. Talk to people who've gotten investments from these folks in the past and see if there's any idiosyncrasies or things that you should know about them before you ask for money.
So, by the way, isn't the fridge pretty comfortable? Like, I know, getting a little bit hot now because we're moving on. We only have about 35 minutes of air in here. So the first 10 minutes, you kind of sit here and you think, hey, this is actually really cool. I can't believe Mac Mahon's paid with $200 in a fridge. He's actually created a podcast studio. But then you get kind of 30 minutes in, you realize I can't breathe
I'm getting
anymore.
close. No, this is a great opportunity, Brian. And I think what you're doing is awesome. And I know that there's a lot of people that listen to these podcasts and who are looking for ideas. You have to be honest with yourself, though, when you're out there building a company and looking for money. Make sure you're solving a problem, not your own problem. Make sure that it's big enough and relevant enough that it's going to engage people. Build something and build some execution that you can prove to potential investors down the road, whether that is by doing some market fit, making sure that you have an MVP or you're on your way to get there, and that what you're going to build is going to work. Don't worry about NDAs. Don't worry about people stealing your IP. This is a race first to market always, unless you're doing something in the hard science world. And there's lots of legal eagles out there that will protect you and can help you with that. But I think having some honesty about what you're really accomplishing and how you're going to do it. And, you have to put more than just sweat equity in. You have to bring some your own resources to the table and friends and family, because that if you can't prove to the people that love you what you're doing is a great idea and that it's worthy of investment, even small pieces, it doesn't have to be millions of dollars. It could be $1,000 or $5,000. But that kind of validates you in the marketplace. And when you go to invest and say, I've raised $25,000, $50,000 from friends and family, that means a lot.
Yeah, because it shows that there's some skin in the game. How much time are you allocating to your fundraising process when you are all the way into it? And I mean, how much time per day? And then also, how long does it normally take for an average to grow? Let's say it's a great entrepreneur who hasn't exited before, because we have to be great to get funding. I was going to say average.
Figure 18 months.
18 months to get
18
funding.
months, I think, yeah. Because by the time, they do diligence and such, that takes time. You're not going to get a check right away. And you have to build a relationship. How much time are you spending? You're spending 110% on fundraising and another 100% on product development.
Yeah, so it's tough, right?
It's an 80, 90-hour-a-week process. The entrepreneurs I know, I don't know how they do it. I don't have the stomach for it, to be honest. I think it's a yeoman's job, and it takes a lot. But at the end of the day, if you're successful, there's a great payoff.
We're happy idiots.
Yeah,
it's true.
And so don't give up on yourself just because people say no.
I think what I'm hearing is, though, you start really early. Don't go through that glory first 6 months where you're enjoying it and you're testing it and you're looking at your site and you're not worrying too much about this and you think, I'll start fundraising when I run out of money. It's too late then, right?
You start fundraising from day one by just letting people know who you are.
And what you're doing and what your milestones are going and where you're going to go in the future.
But let them know who you are as a person.
Yeah.
You're a person of integrity. You're a person that you can trust. You're a person that stands behind his word, that follows through, that follows up. You're a person that can show some execution.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people like you and get along with you.
What's your favorite book, by the way? Business book. Relevant to what we're talking about.
Oh, God, I wish I had time to read. I'll go back to, the basics, Stephen Covey's works on, the titles are escaping me. The one book I always refer to when I talk about networking is Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi.
Yeah.
I think the work that Keith has done on how to build relationships is brilliant.
Yeah.
I use I use his stuff all the time when I talk.
Yeah, I saw him speak there a couple of months back.
And he's a great speaker in his own right, but he was able to devise a way of communicating to people how to network and make it worthwhile.
I agree. What about best advice you ever received?
Be a cockroach. Meaning when the lights go on, don't run away. You have to have tenacity.
Yeah.
And in sales, and fundraising is sales, you have to be tenacious.
So true.
You have to be able to take a no without it being a personal affront. No just means I haven't explained it well enough to make them say yes, or it's the wrong fit. Yeah. So how do I make it the right fit?
Yeah, I love that. And so let's just say, we've got everything that an entrepreneur should do. I think it's really useful. Just in the last minute or two, if you're going to leave some parting advice for everybody here on behalf of, and firstly, my advice is this: join Lava. All of you, I mean it, join Lava. Even, it's so valuable that if you're not even sure what to do for the first month, me, Brian at Expert Dojo, I will pay personally for your first month for you to join Lava. I know Len will do it annually, but for the first month, it's so valuable for you. That's how much I want you to join. But for everybody, members and non-members, you love them dearly. You're giving them these last 2 or 3 minutes of advice as to, on their startup journey, finding investment. What do you got for us?
A, don't give up. Be persistent. Deliver your best self in addition to your best product or service in your company. And be honest with yourself on where you are, and don't try and fool yourself into a place that is unrealistic.
It's true. You can't be honest with other people if you're not honest with yourself. Len, mate, thank you. Everything you've done for Lava and for Los Angeles and for the early stage community over the last 10 years, for everything you're going to do for the next 10 years, drinking with me while we devise more things. And we appreciate you, mate. I appreciate you.
Brian, thank you for the opportunity. And if people do want to find out more about the Los Angeles Venture Association, it's www.lava.org.
And how do they catch you?
They can send me a note through LinkedIn or through info@lava.org.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, cheers, Len.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us. If you know any other entrepreneur equally ambitious as you, then share this podcast by paying it forward to other entrepreneurs who are building your own army. Now, as always, our website, expertdojo.com, is packed with information to help you grow your business, find investment, and train for victory. We also walk our talk and invest in startups every year in our accelerator here in Silicon Beach. You can always reach out to me at brian@expertdojo.com, and I look forward to being back here again at our regular time next Tuesday, 10 a.m. with another of the world's top investors, helping you win the war against startup failure.